By sunrise, I had $24. 8 million, no keys to my own door, and a fiancé who sold me out. But one ledger made everything snap into focus. If messy, real family twists hit home, please like this video and subscribe to Not So Perfect Family 365. Now, let's begin. The chapel still smelled like lilies and lemon oil, the way Grandma used to wipe the banister on Sundays. People I hadn't seen since middle school took turns hugging me too long and whispering that my grandparents were in a better place, as if heaven would know what to do with their exact brand of thrift and thunder. I stood between two wreaths and watched my family perform grief like a job they hated, on time, overdressed, eyeing the exits. Victor, my father, shook hands like he was closing a deal. Helena, my mother, dabbed at a dry eye and posed in her mind for the photos that would never be taken. My brother Evan scrolled his phone and smirked at condolences like they were spam. Aunt Loretta arrived late in a jacket that squeaked money. Uncle Glenn hovered behind her, a man-sized shrug. Every one of them had managed to be absent when Grandpa needed his new prescription picked up. Every one of them had made it to the funeral. By afternoon, we drove through wet streets to the law office, an old brick Victorian with a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Marin Adler's silver hair, steady voice, my grandparents' attorney for decades, met me with coffee and a look that told me I was not alone, not entirely. The conference room had oak paneling and a long table that could seat a Thanksgiving no one wanted anymore. "Let's keep this efficient," Victor said, checking a watch that cost more than my car. "We have planes." Marin folded her hands. "We'll proceed as Elizabeth and Henry requested. My name is Maya Cole. I'm 28, a public school counselor with a studio apartment furnished by yard sales, a car that only starts if you pat the dash, and a savings account that looked better before the price of eggs went feral. I was raised less by my parents and more by the two people we were here to bury, Grandma with her coupon tin and red lipstick, Grandpa with his scarred knuckles and pocket notebook. They built a regional cold chain logistics company from a single box truck and a handshake. They called it Coal Polar because cold didn't sound friendly. They taught me to keep promises and soup in the freezer. Marin read the formalities, paragraphs that sounded like marble. Victor sighed loudly. Helena stirred a spoon in coffee that didn't need stirring. Evan swiped something that made him grin. I watched the rain bead on the window and remembered shelling peas at Grandma's sink, her saying, "Money is a hammer, not a crown. Build with it or put it down." I thought it was one of those cute old lady things. It wasn't. Marin turned a page. "To our beloved granddaughter, Meyer Elise Cole, we leave the whole of our estate, including but not limited to liquid assets and investments totaling $24. 8 million, our residence at 11 Sycamore Lane, and our 22% stake in Coal Polar. We specifically and intentionally make no provision for our son Victor Cole, his wife Helena, their son Evan, our daughter Loretta Pierce, or her husband Glenn." Silence dragged its fingernails across the wood. Helena's cup clinked. "That can't be accurate." Evan laughed once. "Sharp, you're kidding." Loretta leaned forward, chin glossy. You're entitled to listen," Marin said, not unkindly. She lifted a small remote and pressed play. The television on the credenza blinked to life. There they were, my grandparents on their worn plaid sofa, the crocheted afghan I made at 12 thrown crooked over the arm, the brass lamp that made everything look like afternoon. Grandpa had shaved unevenly, as always. Grandma had reading glasses perched where her hair parted, as if she'd forgotten they were there. My throat closed. "If you're seeing this," Grandpa said, "we've gone on ahead." His smile was tired and warm. "We wanted to speak for ourselves." Grandma reached for his hand. "Victor, baby, you were always the loudest in the room. We loved your volume and your spark. We worried about your hunger." She looked at me through the screen. "Maya, you were never in a hurry to be important. You showed up with soup and you stayed to do dishes." Grandpa cleared his throat. "We don't give money to make statues out of people. We give it to make tables longer. We have watched for years who pulls up a chair and who brings a measuring tape. We're not punishing anyone. We're trusting the one who has our values to steward our stuff." Helena's jaw slid sideways, a tell she couldn't control. Victor's face went still, the stillness he used when a board vote didn't go his way. Evan rolled his eyes hard enough to see his brain. "Son," Grandpa said, softer, "we told you no when you wanted yesies we couldn't afford. We told you no when you wanted titles you hadn't earned. We hope you hear the love inside those nos someday. Loretta, you've always been our bright bird, but you flew for shiny things. We hope you choose steadier air." Grandma leaned forward. "To all of you, we wrote this together and prayed over it. To our granddaughter, we give stewardship. To the rest of you, we give blessing and boundaries." She smiled, small and fierce. Character over cash every time. The screen went black. It was like something left the room and then returned as a draft. Helena spoke first, voice sugar poisoned. Maya, darling, you understand this is ceremonial. Your grandparents were very old. Grief makes people dramatic. Marin set a stack of notarized documents on the table. They were tested for capacity by 2 independent physicians within 30 days of execution. There are video logs, journals, and a contemporaneous memorandum explaining their intent. I have copies for each of you. Loretta laughed too brightly. They're making you the villain, honey. Don't let them. I felt my hands finally cold, tight mine. I heard myself before I knew I was going to speak. They're not making me anything. They knew us, all of us. Victor pushed back his chair, the scrape loud. His eyes, pale and steady, found mine like crosshairs. You think you can hold that much and not get burned? Dad, I said, the word felt borrowed. I think they chose on purpose. He smiled without teeth. You think you earned this with your little school office and your free granola bars? Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. Dignity is non-transferable, I swallowed. I don't think I earned anything. I think I was entrusted. Victor leaned across the table, knuckles white, a vein in his temple counting down. Somewhere in the hall, the porch swing cried out again, and I thought of shelling peas in winters we made it through on casseroles and coupons, and the way Grandma would press a 5 into my palm for gas and say, "Don't tell your mother." Rain hit the glass and held there 100 tiny lenses. He lowered his voice to a thread. Over my dead body. They chose the hour the sky turns the color of a bruise. Victor texted, "Come by, we'll talk like adults." The Cole house sat on a hill that always felt a little higher than the rest of town, all slate roof and glass, like it expected to be photographed. Aaron's sedan was already in the semicircle drive, neat and loyal as a dog. For a second I let myself believe he'd come to stand beside me. Then I remembered who taught me the difference between hope and strategy. Helena opened the door with a smile that never quite found her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said, taking both my hands as if she was about to pull me into a dance. "Let's get this over the finish line." The living room had been staged like a TV set. Low lamps, decanters, the good couch no one sat on. Victor stood by the fireplace, one elbow on the mantel the way men do when they're about to deliver wisdom. Evan sprawled with his sneakers on a velvet ottoman, thumbs swiping like he was operating a drone strike. Aaron rose from a chair and searched my face, mouth soft, a peacekeeping expression I'd seen him rehearse in mirrors before salary meetings. Victor lifted his glass. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "I didn't have a choice," I said. "You always have a choice," Helena cooed. "You just need information." Victor nodded to a leather folder on the coffee table. "This is a path forward, clean, grown up. It puts the assets where they can be managed responsibly." "By you," I said. "By the family," he said, and when he said family, he meant Victor. "You're a school counselor, honey. You have a big heart. No one's questioning that. But this is real money, real governance. There are tax structures, market timing, reputational concerns. It's not granola bars and field trips. Nonprofit paycheck brain," Evan muttered without looking up. "No offense." "Take your feet off the ottoman," Helena murmured, still smiling at me. "Maya, we're offering you something generous. 8% for you outright, tax-advantaged. The rest goes into a single holding entity under Victor's direction. You'll have an advisory vote. We'll set you up with a proper home. No more Sycamore Lane." She said my grandparents' address like it was a stain on marble. 8%, I repeated. "Of what they left to me. Of what they set aside for the family," Victor corrected. "Don't get trapped in the letter when the spirit is obvious. They were old, they were sentimental. They were thorough," I said. "They planned." Aaron cleared his throat. "Maze," his voice came out careful. "I think there's a version where you still get taken care of and things don't get ugly. Your dad, Mr. Cole, has relationships you don't want to blow up. Optics matter. The board, the bankers." "You spoke to him before I got here," I said. Aaron's eyes flinched. "We're all trying to land the same plane." Helena leaned in, palms open. "We paid for your schools, your braces, your summer camps, even when you quit. We didn't ask for anything back. We're simply asking you to respect what Victor has built and what Victor can protect." "Grandma and Grandpa built Cole Polar," I said. "They kept it clean when no one was watching. They protected it by telling you no." Victor smiled, cool as a glacier calving. "This attitude is exactly why you need us. You're emotional. You think money is a feelings instrument. It's a power tool. In the wrong hands. In the wrong hands it cuts," I said. "In the right hands it builds tables." Evan snorted. "Pinterest proverb, love it." Victor slid the folder toward me. "Sign here and here. This assigns voting control and asset management to me as head of family. You retain 8% and a stipend. We'll revisit distributions yearly. If you're smart, you'll let me fix the mess Elizabeth and Henry have made with their sentimental allocations." I didn't reach for the pen. The paper smelled like printer heat and cologne. My hands remembered shelling peas and riding hall passes. I looked at Aaron because I needed to know whether I was alone. He looked at the folder like it was the most reasonable object in the room. Helena tilted her head. "Darling, if you love us." "Mom," I said. "Love isn't leverage." Victor's voice lost its velvet. "No one is coercing you, we're offering structure. If you decline, we'll contest, we'll depose, we'll subpoena your texts with Elizabeth. We'll ask the court why an impressionable girl who sat in those people's kitchen every Sunday should control $25 million and a fifth of a company. You want your voicemail transcribed in open court. You want your boyfriend's little startup audited. You want journalists sniffing in your hamper." Aaron stiffened. "That's not necessary," he said quickly to Victor, not to me. Helena sighed saintly. "We're trying to keep this inside the family. You can either be wise or you can be stubborn." Evan finally looked up. "We can make this a blood sport, sis. We have time." I opened the folder. I read every line. The language was a hall of mirrors. Temporary assignment, streamlined probate, one signature to prevent delays. There was a clause that made my stomach drop. Consent to act on behalf of a little door someone could walk through and never come back. "No," I said. The word hung there, small and very heavy. Victor's jaw angled. "Excuse me. I'm not signing," I said. "Not this, not anything like this." Helena's smile cracked. "Maya, you asked me what my choice was," I said. "This is it." Aaron reached toward my wrist. "Maze, let's take a minute." "Don't touch me," I said, soft but steel. He let his hand fall like it had lost its bones. Victor set his glass down and the sound was precise like a gavel. "You don't understand how quickly we can make your life smaller." "I've lived small," I said. "It wasn't a punishment." He leaned close enough for me to count the flecks in his eyes. "You think those two saints can protect you from the world they left you in? You think their little journals and videos will matter when we light you up in court? You have no idea what I can move with one call." "I do," I said. "That's why I won't let you move me." For a beat, no one breathed. Then Victor's smile returned, colder, more practiced. "All right," he said, "be noble." He nodded toward Aaron without looking. "Take her home." On the way out, Helena pressed a kiss to my cheek so light I could have imagined it. "You're tired," she whispered. "Sleep on it, don't burn bridges." The dusk had gone full purple when we pulled away from the hill. Aaron drove one-handed, the way he did when he wanted to look relaxed. They're rattled. He said, "You made your point. Maybe let me talk to him alone. I can get them to 15%, maybe 20. You're negotiating my life in your head," I said. "Turn left at the light." He laughed once, helpless. "You're impossible when you're righteous. And you're convenient when you're scared." We didn't speak again until we reached my building. The lobby smelled like wet umbrellas and lobby plants. The night doorman, Marcus, gave me an apologetic look I didn't understand until I slid my key into the lock and nothing happened. I tried again. The key turned and met a new shape. A strange, clean resistance. Marcus swallowed. "MS Cole, there was a work order this afternoon. Management said it was an emergency security upgrade. New cylinders, new fobs. Only the leaseholder could approve pickup." "I am the leaseholder," I said, and the word shook. He glanced at his screen, at whatever note had been pasted there. It lists Sycamore Investment Partners as owner entity. Authorized contact, Victor Cole. Aaron touched my elbow like we were still on the same team. "Let me call him." I stepped back from the door, my useless key blinking back at me in the brass. The hallway light flickered, hummed, steadied. Somewhere the elevator dinged. My phone buzzed, a new email from the management company. Per section 12B, locks rekeyed. Please schedule appointment with authorized party for access. I stared until the words doubled. Then I looked at Marcus because he looked human and sorry. "It's okay," I said, though nothing was. "It's okay." Behind us, the city shifted on its own axis, and I felt the floor of my life tip just enough to see what was underneath. Marcus worked the phones until the building manager agreed to a humanitarian window. 20 minutes. Escort only. No furniture. Medications and essentials, the manager said through a speaker with too much authority. Anything else is abandonment. A security guard with a buzz cut met us at the elevator, arms folded like a file cabinet. "We're not the enemy," he said, which is what people say when they know exactly which side they are on. My door opened to the sour almond smell of a place that suddenly belonged to someone else. The new cylinder gleamed like a fresh scar. The guard stood in the hall and watched the way men watch fireworks, close enough to say they were there, far enough to pretend no one gets burned. I moved like a thief in my own life, scooping underwear, jeans, my toiletry bag, the shoebox of letters Grandma wrote me in college, the folder with my birth certificate, the photo strip of Aaron and me with our mouths full of cotton candy, my little jar of emergency cash, the ceramic whale mug from a student. In the kitchen, I grabbed the half loaf of bread and the jar of peanut butter and felt idiotic and practical all at once. The elevator dinged. I didn't look up until I felt the temperature change. Victor's shoes were louder than necessary. Helena had wrapped herself in a robe the color of champagne and a face that matched its chill. "We're here for oversight," she said to the guard, who nodded as if this were all part of the lease. "You don't need to be here," I said. Helena leaned in the doorway and surveyed my space like a realtor practicing her sigh. "I'm checking for damage. You'll get your deposit back," I said. I tried to make it a joke. It wasn't. Victor's eyes raked across my open duffel. "Limit is 2 bags, he told the guard. "Policy." The guard shifted. "We said essentials." Victor smiled without humor. "I'm defining it." I tucked Grandma's letters under my arm. Helena watched me fit my life into canvas and zippers and couldn't help herself. "You know," she said, tone conversational, "we were going to divorce before you. Then you happened. We did the right thing. We stayed. 28 years later, here we are." She made a vague, elegant gesture that encompassed the whole building. "There's your gratitude." The words slid in clean and sat there like ice water in an empty stomach. The guard looked at the floor. Even he had limits. Victor looked satisfied with the force of his wife's throw. "You have 10 minutes, he added, checking his watch. "Let's not make a scene." My hands remembered tasks that used to calm me: fold, roll, zip, breathe, while my head played memories like a pinball machine. Grandpa's laugh when I beat him at gin. The click of Grandma's coupon tin. The Sunday I showed up with a dented lasagna and she said, "Perfect, the dent is where the love leaked out." Aaron's text buzzed against my thigh. "I'm working angles. Don't escalate. Sleep at your folks tonight." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred and pocketed the phone like it had bitten me. On the way out, I took down the string of fairy lights from the window, wound them into a nest, and set them on top of my bag. The guard keyed the lock behind us. Victor didn't look back. Helena did, to check for dust. The lobby's glass doors sighed as we pushed through. The city had gone black gold and wet. Marcus lifted a hand that was apology and blessing, then pretended to be very busy with the visitor log. We loaded my bags into the trunk of the car I could barely afford when I bought it, seat fabric rubbed thin at the edge where my knee always pressed. I sat there with my hands on the wheel and nowhere to go. The Cole house loomed in my mind like a museum where I'd never been allowed to touch anything. The only place that felt like mine was a house that wasn't supposed to be mine at all. I dug under a tangle of tote bag detritus, pens, gum, a stress ball shaped like a pear, until my fingers caught paper. An envelope I'd forgotten after the reading, heavy my name in Marin's square hand. For tonight, if needed. Inside, a metal key on a rabbit-shaped fob, Grandma's old joke. Follow the white rabbit, May May. And a slim binder labeled Stewardship, first 72 hours. A sticky note in Marin's careful print. The alarm code is Elizabeth's birthday. Lights on timers. Eat the frozen soup. Something in my chest released. Not relief, permission. The drive to Sycamore Lane took 15 minutes and 20 years. The porch light glowed its faithful glow, the one Grandpa put on a timer and never trusted. The house smelled like lemon oil and cinnamon toast, and old wood holding its breath. I turned off the alarm with fingers that knew the date by muscle memory, and the system made a soft, satisfied chime that made me want to cry. In the kitchen, Grandma's blue Dutch oven sat on the stove where I left it the day before the hospital. I opened the freezer and found 3 quarts of soup labeled in her block letters. Chicken and rice, add lemon, tomato, basil, needs cream, minestrone, extra beans for Maya. I stood there with the door open until the cold pulled me back into my body. I chose minestrone, set it to thaw in the sink, and leaned against the counter the way I always did while Grandma quizzed me on my week, and Grandpa offered inappropriate opinions about school board politics. Upstairs, the guest room was exactly as I'd left it. The paperback I'd been reading face down like a napper, the Afghan we argued about because it scratched, the lamp that made the walls look like honey. I set the binder on the bed and flipped it open. Page 1, a list. Call Marin at 8 a.m. She will bring coffee and a plan. Do not respond to any communications from Victor or Helena until we speak. Document any threats, save screenshots. Lock the back gate. Hector has the spare chain in the potting shed. Breathe, eat soup, sleep with the door locked if it makes you feel better. I laughed and it sounded like someone else. The laugh turned into something not laughter at all, and I let it. Tears found my collarbone and I let them too. When I could see again, I noticed an index card taped inside the binder's cover in Grandma's hand. Money is a hammer. Don't wear it on your head. I plugged in my phone. Messages stacked themselves like unpaid bills. 3 from Aaron, you okay? We'll figure this out. Please don't make enemies. 7 from Helena, alternating sweet and sour. 1 from Victor, a calendar invite titled Settlement Discussion Urgent for 8 a.m. I deleted it. 2 from Tessa, my best friend since sophomore year and a PR fixer when she wasn't my emergency wine. Call me ASAP. Friendly press can be your friend. Don't let them own the narrative, babe. It was the kind of comfort that sounded like a pitch. I set the phone face down and turned off the light. The house held me the way a good coat holds a winter. The phone buzzed once more, a low insect against wood. I almost let it go. Something in me knew better. I flipped it over. A text from Evan. No greeting. A photo of my car in the Sycamore Lane driveway taken from a low angle, the porch light a halo over the hood. Enjoy the house while you can, he wrote. Nice to see the rabbit key still works. Dawn came on like a slow apology, rinsing the kitchen in weak gold. I hadn't really slept. The house had old wood expanding, pipes murmuring, the heater coughing itself awake, so I let it talk and tried to breathe like the binder told me to. I made coffee in Grandma's dented percolator and set 2 mugs out before I remembered I was alone. The bell rang at 7:59. Marin was punctual even with grief. She stepped in, shook off the chill, and put a paper bag on the counter like a peace offering. Sesame bagel for your nerves. Cinnamon raisin to bribe fate. She scanned my face. You didn't sleep. I practiced not crying on the pillow, I said. I failed. Good, she said. Cry here, don't cry in their hallways. We sat at the breakfast nook where Grandpa used to whistle, me on the bench that still had a pencil scratch from a failed crosswords rage. Marin opened her laptop with the confidence of someone about to start a small, necessary war. First moves, she said, ticking them off. Estate accounts, we've initiated a temporary freeze for 48 hours while titles are recorded. Company registry, I've notified counsel to flag any attempt to transfer your grandparents' shares. Bankers and brokers, do not accept instructions from anyone but you or me. We'll have formal letters by noon. Victor said they'll contest. They always say that. She slid a document across to me. These are template restraining orders. We'll put names on them if needed. Here are cease and desists tailored to last night's texts. She glanced at my phone. Evidence? I passed it over. She screenshotted Evan's photo, Helena's pendulum messages, Victor's calendar invite, and the management email. We'll bake them into a record, she said, almost affectionate. Thank you for being harassed, it helps. The back door knocked politely. I jumped. Marin didn't. Hector filled the frame the way an old tree fills a yard, quiet, rooted. Mid-50s, carpenter's shoulders in a flannel that had been washed honest. He held his cap in his hands. I remembered him from summers, showing me how to oil the garage door track, teaching me the trick where you pull a dandelion root clean without snapping it. Miss Maya, he said, warm but businesslike. Marin told me to come early. Come in, I said, please. He closed the door gently behind him. Alarm code working, he asked. Grandma's birthday, I said. He nodded, approval in it. Mr. Henry switched the system last year. Didn't trust the one Mr. Victor installed too many blind spots. He looked at Marin. The new one logs everything, cloud and external drive. I brought copies. He produced a small hard case and set it on the counter with a click. Marin's eyes sharpened. Hector, marry me. He grinned like a man who never expected to be the day's hero. Mrs. Daria's on her way, he added. She said she'd bring banana bread for courage. As if conjured by her name, there was a thud on the back steps and then the back door swung open without waiting. I don't knock where I've scrubbed floors, Mrs. Daria announced, bustling in a cloud of clean laundry smell and cinnamon. She'd been their housekeeper for 22 years, which meant she knew where the tape and the secrets lived. She put a foil-wrapped loaf on the table, pressed my cheeks in her palms, and kissed my forehead like she had the day I got my driver's license and ran over a rake. You eat, said, you don't faint today. Another knock, front this time, short, precise, like a metronome. Hector went to answer. A woman in a navy blazer and work boots walked in, her hair in a sharp bob, her expression already counting inventory. She stuck out a hand. Rosa Alvarez, she said, COO at Cole Polar. Your grandmother taught me to swear in 3 languages and to negotiate in 4. I was at the warehouse at 5 to make sure no one got cute. I remember you, I said. I did Rosa at barbecues, taking phone calls that smelled like diesel and deadlines, always leaving with a tub of Grandma's potato salad. You brought a forklift to my 16th birthday when the cake was too big to get through the door. Logistics, she said, and allowed herself a small smile. She put a binder on the table next to Marin's. We need to talk about Victor's consulting invoices and Loretta's art donations. Later, Marin said, for now, triage. Hector set down his case and opened it on the counter. Inside, neatly labeled USB drives, each with a date and a brief description in block letters that looked like Grandma's had taught him how to print. This is from the last 6 months, he said. Front door, back door, garage, hallway, study, safe room, time-stamped. He selected one and slid it into Marin's laptop. The screen filled with the hallway outside the study on the day of the funeral, the angle high, the color slightly blue. After a parade of suits and perfumes passed, Helena appeared. She moved like fog, silent, inevitable. She glanced over her shoulder, then went into the study, her clutch tucked under her arm like a burglar's satchel. She came out 8 minutes later with the clutch bulging like a squirrel's cheek. I didn't breathe. Marin did not take notes, she took coordinates. Next, Hector said. A time stamp from 3 hours after the reception. Evan, in a hoodie and cap, slipping through the mudroom door with the cautious confidence of someone who thinks he's invisible. He went down the hall, came back with a velvet box and an electronics bag, stuffed both into a backpack, and froze, eyes lifting at a sound. He turned toward the camera by accident and lifted 2 fingers to his brow in a salute like a feral joke. The hoodie shadowed his face, but there was only one person in the family who made smug look like a birthmark. Keep going, Rosa said flat. There was Victor, 2 days later, strolling through the study like a man in his own library. He opened drawers, flipped through files, paused at Grandpa's old safe and tapped the keypad with a thoughtful frown. He didn't try to open it. He just stood there, read the air, and left. It was the way he used to lean over my homework and say, "So, what's the trick here?" Like everything was a magician's act he could learn if he watched close enough. Marin closed the video and set her jaw. "We won't need to threaten criminal charges," she said. "We'll prepare them." Mrs. Elizabeth kept notes, Mrs. Daria said, eyes bright in the way of a woman who likes order returning to a room. In the little red books, every visit, who called, who asked, who stayed to talk about the weather. In the study, I said, "Top shelf left." We filed down the hall like a small procession. The study smelled like pencil shavings and lemon oil, and the peppermint Grandpa pretended wasn't candy. Hector reached for the top shelf with an easy stretch and began pulling down the red notebooks. The bindings were worn smooth by hands that had believed in documentation. He handed one to me. The date on the spine was last year. I flipped to a page marked with a sliver of recipe card. Grandma's block letters were relentless. May 15, Victor visited. First time in 5 months. Began with business. Asked for bridge loan against personal margin. Henry said no. He accused us of starving our brand. Left without finishing his tea. Later, Evan texted Henry, "Think bigger, there's a way to unlock the equity." Another 2 weeks later, June 1, Loretta called about a donation for a museum fundraiser. Name sound made up. Advised her we prefer local causes we can vet. She said I was embarrassing her. Wrote thank you note to Rosa's crew instead. They worked through the night to save a client's vaccine shipment when the freeway closed. I felt my throat close around a laugh that wanted to be a sob. Grandma had kept score, sure, but not the way Victor kept score. She counted who did dishes, who left the last cookie, who showed up. Marin took pictures of every page with the focus of someone mapping a minefield. "Here, Mrs." Daria said softly, reaching behind the desk to a tiny panel, barely visible in the molding. She told me once, only if the right person asked. Hector pressed his thumb against the panel, and a narrow compartment popped open with a tired click. Inside, 2 envelopes. One labeled for Maya, open when steady in Grandma's hand. The other heavier, sealed with a strip of linen tape, labeled off-site inventory and instructions. My fingers didn't feel like mine. I slipped the first envelope into my pocket without opening it. I wasn't steady. Not yet. Marin took the second and slid it into her binder like a promise. From the doorway came a quiet cough, the kind people make when they're entering a sacred place and don't know where to step. A man in his 40s with a soft tie and a hard briefcase lingered on the threshold. "Noah Bennett," he said. "Investment manager. I worked with Henry and Elizabeth since 2009. They told me to come if things got sporty." Rosa snorted. "Sporty is one word." Noah set his case on the desk and clicked it open. The papers inside were neat stacks with tabs that looked like a rainbow had been organized by an accountant. "We need to talk about 2 things," he said. 1, Victor's personal margin loans. He's pledged assets that are, aspirational. 2, your grandparents' portfolio is conservative and fine, but there are stopgaps we can put in place today to prevent anyone from trading around you. Margin loans. I repeated, the term tasting like something metallic. Think of it like borrowing against your house, but betting the house will get taller every day, Noah said. If the house shrinks, the lender asks you to add more house. Victor has been optimistic. Rosa's mouth was a thin line. He tried to use vendor credit lines to float personal risk. We blocked him at the company, but if the banks call, he'll try to make it your problem, Marin finished. He'll call it family reputation. He'll ask you to step up. Don't, Rosa said. I won't, I said, and heard the steadiness in my own voice as if it belonged to someone I might be able to become. Noah slid a folder across the desk. Here's a simple instruction letter for brokers. No transfer, no trading, no authorization without Maya's written consent and my countersignature. We'll fax and email it. And yes, we will fax it because the one broker who still loves fax machines will be the one who needs it. He handed me a pen. Initial here and here, this is boring armor. We're going to wear a lot of it. While we worked, Hector flipped through other USB labels. Garage 10/18, back gate 10/21, study 10/23. He pulled one that made his brow hitch, mudroom 10/14, 2:07 a.m., and passed it to Marin. The grainy image showed a sliver of the mudroom, a shadow passing through, a large hand covering the lens too late to stop the frame from catching a ring, white gold, distinctive, a little dent from where it had been slammed in a car door years ago. Rosa leaned in. That's Victor's ring. Hector didn't look surprised. He still has the old fob, he said. The one to the side gate. Mr. Henry had me change the code, but men like that think codes are codes. He never considered we might change the metal. My phone buzzed again. Tessa, press wants a human angle. I can shape this. Let me help before your parents do. Then another, call me. Victor reached out, concerned. Wants me to keep things classy. He offered to cover my retainer. My stomach flipped. I loved Tessa like a sister who stole your clothes and then handed you a better outfit. I also knew a retainer offer when I saw it. Put her on ice, Marin said without my asking. No statements, not a peep. We don't do PR until we secure the perimeter. Perimeter. I said, half a joke. Legal, financial. Physical, Marin said, not joking. Speaking of Hector, chain the back gate. Daria, lock windows first floor, then set the upstairs alarms to partial so Maya can move. Rosa, draft a memo for your leadership team. No changes, status quo. Noah, hit send on those faxes to the Stone Age. The house warmed with motion. It felt like waking up to a dozen aunts and uncles who all knew exactly what to do in a storm. I stood in the study and read my grandparents' handwriting like it was the first good news in weeks. Grandma, 3 months ago, Helena brings flowers and asks if we've considered updating the will for modern tax law. She says I'm not thinking about legacy. I tell her legacy is what people say about you when you leave the room and they stop being polite. She doesn't laugh. Grandpa, in a cramped note tucked between pages, if you're reading this, kiddo, and you're scared, that means you're paying attention. Pay attention, then act. We've left you tools, not trophies. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest until the edges hurt. The house hummed around me. For the first time since the funeral, I felt less like prey and more like a person with a plan. The doorbell went, not the polite back knock, but the front bell. The one Grandpa used to unplug on Halloween because he couldn't stand teenagers playing ding-dong-ditch. Hector moved toward the foyer. Marin lifted a hand. Wait, we listened. A woman's voice, confident, warm, used to microphones. Hector opened the door exactly as far as courtesy required. A woman in a charcoal suit stood there, hair threaded with silver, badge at her hip, the kind of presence that made rooms behave. Morning, Hector, she said. Is she in? He opened wider. Chief Williams, he said. Come in. She stepped over the threshold like it meant something. Maria Williams, she said to me, offering a hand. Your grandmother and I ran the town's most feared bake sale together. I'm here as a friend, not in uniform, unless I need to be in uniform. Please be whatever scares them the most, I said, only half kidding. She smiled. I saw the parking camera at the station. Figured I'd check in before I start my day. She turned to Marin. You have about 40 minutes. For what? Marin asked, already reaching for a pen. Chief Williams listened to the air like a hunter. They're already on their way, she said. 2 cars, 1 locksmith, and a pair of movers who think this is a routine job. By 10, the house looked like a courtroom that had learned manners. Marin placed chairs where Grandma used to line up pies to cool. Chief Williams sat near the front window with her badge tucked away but her posture not. At the head of the room, we left the coffee table bare, a stage with nothing to hide behind. The grandfather clock ticked like a metronome someone had set to truth. Hector opened the door before the bell could be abused. Victor walked in first, the weather parting for him out of habit. Helena floated after, lips lacquered into diplomacy. Evan arrived in a hoodie that advertised someone else's brand as if he were sponsored. Loretta and Glenn trailed, faces arranged for church or war, whichever paid better. Victor took one look at the gathering and let his mouth smile while his eyes did the math. You brought an audience, he said. Witnesses, Marin corrected, and coffee. From the hallway, tall man with a careful gait stepped in, his hair the exact gray of noon. Judge Robert Henderson, Marin said. Retired friend of the family. Victor's jaw flickered. He'd once lost a quiet lawsuit in Henderson's court and never forgave the outcome or the tone. Robert, he said, aiming for genial and landing on thin. Victor, the judge returned, shaking no hands. Chief Williams lifted 2 fingers. Morning, here is Maria. Would hate to have to come back as chief. Pastor Elaine arrived with a tin of cookies no one would eat. I promised Elizabeth I'd keep you all honest, she said, setting them down like a sacrament and then taking a seat with her palms open on her knees. Helena did a slow pan of the faces and the folders and landed on me like a laser pointer. "Dramatic," she said. "You always did like a scene." "I like proof," I said. Rosa stepped forward, set her binder down with a thud that said no performance bonuses were at stake here, and flipped to a tab. "We'll start simple. 12 years ago, Cole Polar issued a personal loan to Victor Cole for $200,000 labeled Vendor Bridge. No vendor exists by that name. Interest only for 6 months. No principal repayment was ever made." She held up a copy of the promissory note with Victor's signature and the company's countersign in Grandpa's block letters. Elizabeth and Henry forgave it privately. The board never saw it. Victor chuckled like the man at the bar who can't believe the story he's hearing about himself. "It was a rounding error, Rosa. Rounding errors don't buy Aspen decks," Rosa said without blinking. Noah stepped in, his voice soft where Rosa's was steel. "We also have Victor's margin contracts." He laid out pages like tarot, broker statements, collateral schedules, the neat little places where numbers turn into obligations. Collateral pledged includes anticipated inheritance of Henry and Elizabeth Cole. He paused. "Which is not a thing." Victor shrugged. "A banker mistyped. I'll correct it." "You can correct it," Noah said. "After you unwind it. The call trigger is near. If prices move 2%, you'll owe cash you don't have." Helena plucked at an invisible thread on her sleeve. Maya could resolve this with one generous gesture. Or Victor could resolve it by selling the extra car, Chief Williams suggested, not kindly. Hector carried a small monitor to the coffee table and set a single USB drive beside it like evidence in a glass bag. "Now pictures," he said, and pressed play. The hallway appeared, a bit blue at the edges. The timestamp glowed. Funeral day, 4:12 p.m. Helena entered the frame with the liquid efficiency of someone who never bumps into furniture. She glanced both ways, then slid into the study. 8 minutes later, she emerged with her clutch heavy enough to pull on her shoulder. She checked her lipstick in the glass of Grandpa's framed union certificate and left. Helena didn't flinch. "I was getting a handkerchief," she said. "There were tears." "From your eyes?" Mrs. Daria asked under her breath. Next reel, the mudroom, 2:07 a.m., a hoodie, a backpack, a sideways salute, Evan thinking he was charming. The room did not applaud. Evan smiled the way boys do when they've been caught enough times to treat it like a costume. "I was retrieving my property." "Name of the brand on the electronics bag?" Hector asked, mild. Evan shrugged. "Blue." The judge's pen scratched once on his pad, a sound that carried more than it should have. Rosa turned a page. "We can do this all afternoon," she said. "But here's the bottom line. Henry and Elizabeth anticipated this, and they planned for it. Maya has control. The company is not your ATM. The house is not your antique mall. The story is not whatever you can sell a brunch table." Loretta leaned forward, her earrings catching light like tiny weapons. "You're all very impressed with yourselves," she said. "But the public court of opinion, public court of criminal theft is quieter," Chief Williams said, still friendly, which made it worse. Victor spread his palms. "Enough theater. We came for a conversation and maybe a few heirlooms. My mother promised me the cameo. She promised Helena the brooch." Mrs. Daria drew herself up to her full 5'2". "She promised you nothing after you called her provincial at Thanksgiving and left with the roast in your to-go bag." Helena's smile thinned to a filament. "You overstepped, dear." "I clean steps," Mrs. Daria said. "Over and under." Marin let the room breathe and then set a neat stack of papers in the center of the table, squared them with her palm. "These are notices," she said. 1. A demand for the return of items removed without consent. The gold locket, the velvet ring box, the silver watch, the electronics bag. 2. A cease and desist for further attempts to access the property. 3. Draft restraining orders ready to be filed if entry is attempted again without written permission. 4. A memorandum of evidence, video messages, logs that will accompany any filing. Consider this a courtesy. Victor didn't touch the papers. "You think you can shame me into compliance?" "I think you can count," Marin said. He turned his gaze on me, that steady low heat. "You're really going to make me do this?" "I'm not making you do anything," I said. "You brought yourself." Helena reached for a different instrument. "Maya, baby, you don't have to be so hard. Life is long, families bend if you just—" Pastor Elaine lifted a hand. "Helena, respect the wishes of the dead so the living can live." The room went quiet enough to hear the clock and the old house breathing. Somewhere a pipe pinged like it had an opinion. Victor broke first. The way men break when they realize power is now paperwork. He picked up the top sheet and scanned it, mouth a straight line. He flicked to the next, to the signature block that would make his refusal to return items read like an intention. He set it down. "This isn't over," he said. Judge Henderson capped his pen. "In my experience, it often is." They began to gather themselves with choreographed dignity, jackets, handbags, moral certainty. Evan took a step toward the side hall, then thought better of it under Hector's weathered stare. Loretta touched a picture frame, as if to remember it, until she could buy one that cost more. The front door opened on a new draft of cologne and nerves. Aaron stood on the threshold, hair finger-combed, tie loosened like he'd run to be late. He took in the room, the judge, the chief, the binders, my face, and swallowed his script. I came as soon as Victor turned, and for the shortest beat something like delight touched his features. He looked at Aaron the way a man looks at a tool he's been told is custom. He held that look a fraction too long, like he was checking teeth on a gear. Then he smiled as if the smile were for me. The house exhaled after they left, like a stage after the curtain. The witnesses drifted toward coffee and doorways. Hector checked latches. Rosa took a call in Spanish that sounded like steel braided with patience. Judge Henderson patted my shoulder once the way men who believe in paper do. Only Aaron stayed, hands in his pockets, eyes trying to be soft. "Can we talk?" he asked. Marin hovered in the doorway to the kitchen, half sentry, half sage. I nodded. 5 minutes, she said, then pretended to read an email within earshot. We stood by the sink where Grandma taught me to cut lemon pith away from peel. Aaron spoke to the window. That was a lot. That was basic hygiene, I said. I'm trying to keep things from going nuclear, he said. Your dad, Mr. Cole, he's activated. He thinks you're about to blow up the family brand. I told him we could cool everyone down if we're smart. We, I said. I meant you. He corrected, and me together. He reached for my hand like it was a prop. Optics matter, Mays, boards, bankers, the market, people get spooked. Maybe you can take, I don't know, 15 or 20% outright, put the rest in a vehicle where Victor, the number you just said, I interrupted, is the number Victor offered me last night. He blinked like the lights dimmed a notch. It's it's rehearsed. He lowered his voice the way he did before asking a founder for a better valuation. Look, I had a beer with him. One, I wanted to understand his angle so I could steer him. I'm not the enemy, I'm trying to be a bridge. Bridges don't collect tolls, I said. Marin stepped in without moving. No more substantive conversation about assets, she said pleasantly. Maya, we need you in the breakfast nook when you're ready. Aaron flinched like she turned on a bright light. He offered to help us, Mays. Help you. Your dad has relationships I can't even. My father offered to buy my spine at 8%, I said. You're reselling it at 20. His jaw clicked. You're impossible when you get righteous. And you're convenient when you're scared. He stared at the lemon bowl like it might tell him what to say. Can we at least agree you don't want a war? I don't, I said. I want a boundary. Marin's phone chimed. She skimmed, then looked up at me. Noah just got pinged from the bank, she said. 2 new external transfer profiles requested on the estate's cash account. Both were denied because of our freeze. One profile name is Latch Lab Inc., Aaron's company. Must be a mistake, he said too quickly. Color rose like a rash at his collar. My CFO sets up vendor rails all the time, could have fat-fingered the account ID. Marin didn't blink. The beneficiary email on file routes to M. Sloan at HelenaCole.com, that your CFO? He swallowed. Okay. I asked Margot to talk to Helena's assistant about introductions. I didn't ask anyone to set up transfers, there's obviously some crossed wires. Or some very straight ones, I said. He stepped closer, palms open. Maya, I would never take from you, ever. I'm trying to keep all of this from eating us. Let me fix it. By Monday, I asked. He nodded too fast. By Monday. My phone vibrated on the counter like a trapped bee. Tessa, pick up. Friendly outlet ready to run a soft piece. Grieving granddaughter, complicated estate, generous gesture to family. We control the frame. Another, settlement idea, take 20% plus foundation named after you, give Victor steering for PR stability. I can thread the needle. The numbers were identical to the ones already circling the room like a hawk. I called. Where did you get that number? Crisis math, she said. I heard the clack of her keyboard, the smell of coffee through the wire. Also, Helena rang to say she's worried about you. You took her call? I said. She's your mother, babe. She says she wants to keep this classy. She offered to pay your retainer, didn't she? A beat. She said the family would cover reasonable PR costs so you're not out of pocket while we... Who's PR? I asked. Maya, don't do the black and white thing, she said, voice turning managerial. We can reframe this as stewardship. You're not losing, you're leading. A soft landing is still a landing. Soft, I said, like a trap. She sighed, bored of my ethics. Call me when you're ready to be strategic, she said, and hung up before I could remind her who taught me to hold my breath when a wave hits. I set the phone down and realized my hands were shaking. Not fear, adrenaline having nowhere to go. Marin slid a glass of water toward me. We're tightening the perimeter, she said. No new profiles, Noah's locking the pipes. Hector's adding 2 more cameras outside. And Maya, Do not sign anything you didn't generate. Aaron put his hands up. No one is asking her to sign anything. Marin looked at him with the kind of kindness that keeps knives sharp. Not yet. He laughed once, brittle. You can't quarantine her forever, we're engaged. We're on pause, I said. His head snapped. Since when? Since you started having beers with my father about my life. Unbelievable, he said, choosing the word that let him be offended. I have fought for you in rooms you will never. Don't. I said, you never liked who I was as much as you loved what I could make you look like. He closed his eyes to count to 10. At 6 he opened them again. I will fix the bank thing, he said, crisp, and I'll ask Tessa to back off. Just don't set fire to the bridge while I'm on it. Then get off it, I said. He left with his jaw set in that brave boy line he wore to investor meetings. The porch door clicked behind him like a period. Noah arrived 5 minutes later with a printout. We confirmed the requests, he said, tapping the page. 2 test microdeposits attempted from the estate account to external accounts matching Latch Lab and Pierce Arts Initiative, Loretta's shell. Both blocked, we'll get affidavits. Good, Marin said, and the brokers. Faxed, he said, deadpan enough to make me smile. The house settled into work. Mrs. Daria set out bowls like she was feeding an army. Rosa returned with a plan to keep 3 warehouses open through a storm without Victor's signature. Hector came in with chain-link dirt on his palms and a grin. Back gate sings a new song, he said. At dusk, when the house turns thoughtful, I took Grandma's for Maya open when steady envelope onto the back steps. The paper felt like a palm on my shoulder. Inside, a photograph of me at 5 in an oversized sun hat, holding a tomato like a trophy. A key to the potting shed with rabbit teeth filed into the metal, and a note. May, she wrote. No is a complete sentence. So is yes. Choose them on purpose. Love, E. I laughed and cried at once, wiping my face with my sleeve like a kid. When I went back inside, my phone chimed again, an email from an address I didn't recognize. Airgap, drop at Protonmail, subject, you should see this before Monday. No body text. 1 attachment, post-nup draft V3, PDF, my thumb hovered then pressed. The document opened crisp and clinical. Post-nuptial agreement between Meyer E. Cole and Aaron R. Hart. Clause 4C stopped my eyes. Spouse hereby irrevocably assigns to Hart all voting rights and management authority over any and all shares or membership interests in Cole Polar, LLC and related entities, present and future. In the footer metadata, prepared by J. Keller-esque, CC, M. Sloan at Helena Cole. The porch light hummed. Somewhere, the grandfather clock counted a number I didn't want to say out loud. I stared until the words steadied and realized the part of me that had been steady all day was now very, very awake. Night leans differently over Sycamore Lane. The trees hold their breath like witnesses. I took the red notebooks to the dining table and stacked them the way Grandma stacked pancakes, largest at the bottom, smallest on top, a tower of something warm. The paper smelled like pencil lead and lemon oil, and the faint starch of aprons ironed too hot. Rosa had gone back to the warehouse with a thermos and a plan. Noah camped on the study sofa with his laptop lit low, feeding faxes to the Stone Age. Hector walked the perimeter, boots whispering against gravel. Mrs. Daria folded dish towels into perfect thirds like a spell. Marin returned from a short errand carrying the linen-sealed envelope we'd found in the molding. Off-site packet, she said, setting it down as if it might crack. They asked me to keep it in my safe until there were fireworks. Consider tonight sparkly. We didn't open it right away. We started with the red ledger that had a coffee ring on the cover. Grandma's block letters marched down the page like they were late for church. July 8, Evan arrived with business pitch, app rating public restrooms. Told him we do not invest in anatomical comedy. He laughed, asked for small bridge. No. August 2, Victor brought a bottle of wine we can't pronounce. Told us we were hoarding legacy, asked for temporary access to excess cash before quarterly numbers, offered to return with interest. Henry said, son, do not rent your backbone. No. September 21, Loretta requested donation for Pierce Arts Initiative. Googled, website registered last week. Address is a P.O. box in Coral Bay. Pictures stolen from a museum in Madrid. No, sent $50 to animal shelter instead. Note, do not tell Loretta she calls cats conditional friends. I laughed wetly. The ledger had Grandma's humor and Grandpa's flint. It also had receipts, names, dates, check numbers, apology notes that weren't apologies at all. Hector drifted in and leaned a hip against the hutch, reading over my shoulder with the respectful nosiness of a man allowed to dust family history. Mrs. E. wrote like a bookkeeper, he said fondly. Said if you don't write it down, the truth forgets. Marin tapped the sealed envelope with her nail. We need what's in here, she said. Then the truth gets teeth. The The linen tape resisted and then gave with a sigh. Inside, a sheaf clipped tight, 2 keys on tags, a flash drive labeled ICE chest in Grandpa's square hand. On top, Grandma's note. If Victor makes this about reputation, show him the math. If Loretta makes this about art, show her the bank. If Evan makes this about hustle, show him what the law calls theft. Do not be mean. Do not be shy. E and H. Marin spread the sheaf on the table. It was not just paper, it was a map. Page 1, a list of lenders tied to the company's warehouse lines, the kind of boring money that keeps cold trucks cold. In the margins, Grandpa's pencil. Victor coaxed personal guarantee from Helena to expedite. We revoked with addendum 3B. Watch for side letters. He is fond of side doors. Page 2, 3 side letters. In bad legalese, Victor had convinced a junior banker to draft. One even tried to name anticipated inheritance as collateral. All unsigned, one with an angry red line across it in Marin's own pen from months ago. She arched an eyebrow. He tried this twice, she said. They sent it to me, I sent it back. Henry told him no in a room with 3 other people who still have ears. Page 3, a printout from a bank in the Caymans. Pierce Arts Initiative Limited. Account ending in 4642. Beneficiary, L. Pierce. Deposits labeled donation from a regional arts patron I'd never heard of, routed through 2 shells and a board trust officer. In the margin, Grandma had written, Loretta builds museums out of fog. A second notation in Grandpa's hand, FBI contact. P. Jenkins likes chocolate chip cookies, hates paperwork. Use only if she breaks your wrists first. I stared at the logo until the island palm tree blurred. She's been living on this. Rosa, back from the car with a new binder, whistled low when she saw the letterhead. That's not even good laundering, she said. It's a white dress at a tomato fight. Page 4, Victor's margin statements again, but annotated by Grandpa with small, furious arrows. Do not let him call this bridging. It's gambling, borrowed against market highs, pledged with fake collateral. If the wind changes, he'll sell the weather. Noah leaned in. He's at 78% of trigger on 2 lines, he said, quietly excited in the way only accountants get. If we pull nothing and the market yawns, he's in a corner by Monday. He'll paint that corner as a family emergency, Marin said. He'll say a generous child can fix it. I swallowed the metallic taste of that sentence. No, I said to the room and myself. I won't. We kept going. The flash drive held scans. Victor emailing a banker, CCing Helena's assistant, asking if pre-consent could be assumed for efficiency. Loretta sending a thank you to a donor that read like a furniture catalog. Evan Venmo requesting Grandma $50 for gas emotional, which would have been funny if it didn't hurt. At the bottom of the stack was a notarized letter with Grandpa's full union name and belt buckle signature. To whom it concerns after my pulse stops. We, Henry and Elizabeth Cole, affirm we have never pledged our estate, our shares, or our granddaughter's future to secure any third party's personal debts. Any document purporting to say otherwise is fraud. And if my son is holding the pen, it's an old habit of his. HCEC, Mrs. Daria crossed herself as if the dead might be listening in the vents. He wrote that with a smile, she said. Then he made stew. I flipped open another ledger and fell into a memory sideways, the ink-smudged kind where the page turns into a kitchen. Grandma's hands in flour. My small fingers in dough. The radio playing a station that didn't know our names. Grandpa's voice floating in from the garage. You can say no and still love people. It's called being a person, not a purse. Back in the present, Hector set a small black case on the table. Pulled this from the safe room shelf, he said. Forgot it was there until the gate sang. Inside, a micro SD card and a folded paper with Grandma's picture of a rabbit drawn in blue ink. On the card, audio. Marin plugged it into her laptop and hit space. Victor's voice filled the room, casual, tired, a baritone you could mistake for honesty if you didn't grow up on it. We need to move on this, Matt. She's not competent. She writes journal entries about soups. She keeps giving away money to janitors and bus drivers. We're trying to protect the brand here. Marin's lips thinned. He tried to have Elizabeth declared incompetent last year, she said, not surprised so much as confirmed. We squashed it. He didn't know what we recorded. Another voice, Grandma's, came through, clear as a bell someone dusted. Matthew, are we taping? Good, Victor. I can alphabetize the spices in your kitchen blindfolded and tell you which receipt you're hiding in the drawer by the fridge. Do not confuse gentleness with confusion. Rosa laughed out loud. It felt like oxygen. We worked until the grandfather clock scolded us into noticing it was past 9. Marin gathered the packet back into order, slid it into a red file, and wrote across the tab with a Sharpie that smelled like permanent boundaries. Tomorrow, she said, we send a letter to Victor's bank quoting Henry's affidavit, CCing counsel and the compliance desk so no one sneaks a favor through. We send a different letter to the Caymans, they hate sunlight. We prep criminal referrals quietly, and we invite Loretta to bring her appraiser again so we can have a conversation about provenance while a notary listens. Invite, I said. We bait, she corrected. With manners. The house ticked and hummed. I took one ledger upstairs and left the others in a neat, defiant stack. In Grandma's script, people were exactly who they were, even when they pretended otherwise. The clarity made me feel both steadier and more breakable, like glass that knows it's glass. In the hallway, my phone lit my hand blue. A text from an unknown number with Evan's particular grammar. Audit TMW 9 a.m. We're coming to catalog family assets. Don't lock the side door. We'll be quick if you're smart. There was a photo attached, the side gate at twilight, chain hanging loose like a tongue. Hector had chained it at dusk. The picture showed it unclasped, the padlock open, the numbers rotated to 0000 like a joke. A second text followed before I could breathe. A winking emoji and a map pin dropped on Sycamore Lane. Tomorrow, I whispered to the ledger in my hands to the house, to the woman who wrote in block letters and baked banana bread for courage. Tomorrow it is. We woke the house before the sun could. Hector reset the chain on the back gate, twisted the new padlock until it sang, then added a second one 2 feet higher like a belt and suspenders. People see what they want at eye level, he said. They don't look up. Marin and I moved through rooms with a list and latex gloves, lifting what mattered and logging it like nurses counting sponges after surgery. The emerald brooch became a thrift store rhinestone twin. Grandpa's silver watch was swapped for a dollar store face with a convincing weight. The velvet ring box Helena had swallowed with her purse yesterday returned in decoy form, the real one sleeping in Hector's locked toolbox, which he locked inside a steel file cabinet which he chained to a pipe. Rosa texted, "Warehouse stable, if Victor calls, we're reconciling pallets." Noah replied with a photo of a fax confirmation like a dad joke. Chief Williams arrived with enough presents to fill a courtroom, in jeans and a windbreaker with Chief stitched small. "Off duty," she said, tapping the letters, "until duty is useful." She did a slow walk through, eyes finding angles. Sightlines to doors, how the banister curve hid feet, the way sound traveled if a person with bad intentions tried to be quiet. "If they bring an appraiser, check his license," she said. "People who stake their reputation bring cards." By 9, the driveway performed wealth again. Victor's German engineering, Helena's Pearl SUV, Loretta's red midlife convertible, a box truck trying to look like a moving company and succeeding only at looking rented. A man with a tape measure and cologne got out of a black sedan and introduced himself as Gordon Vale, fine appraisals. His shoes had more confidence than his eyes. Hector opened the door a courteous 7 inches. "State your purpose." "We're cataloging heirlooms," Victor announced, stepping through the 7 inches like a birthright widened it. "Cooperative spirit would be appreciated." "Cooperative spirit is upstairs labeling linen closets, Mrs. Daria said from the hall. "You can speak to MS Cole." I stood in the foyer with Marin to my right and Chief Williams a step behind, hands in pockets, badge out of sight but not out of mind. "You're early," I said. "Punctual," Victor corrected, then clocked the audience and recalibrated his smile. "We'd like to avoid unpleasantness." "Then return what you took," Marin said, "and set a clipboard on the entry table. Sign that you've delivered them back." Helena's mouth quivered like a string being tuned. "We won't be antagonized, Marina." Marin said, and didn't look up. Gordon the appraiser cleared his throat. "If we could begin with jewelry, then art." Chief Williams tilted her head. "License." His hand went to his pocket, then stopped. "Forgot my card." "Name and number," she said. He rattled both off too fast. She tapped them into her phone and didn't hit call. We watched the lie sweat. We let them in because bait works best on open ground. In the study, I opened the drawer with the decoy brooch, its paste stones winking like bad teeth. Helena reached for it with a tremor she performed as reverence. Gordon peered like he was auditioning for expertise. He pronounced. "Mid-century, modest value." "Modest," Helena repeated, disappointed in the word like it owed her money. We moved to the mantel. The silver watch ticked politely. Gordon pressed it to his ear. "Not significant," he said. "Sentimental." "Imagine that," Rosa murmured from the doorway. In the dining room, Loretta beelined to the little landscape Grandma loved because the sky was a color that didn't have a name. "This is the one I'm taking," she said, not asked. Gordon leaned, sniffed, nodded. "Charming," he said, "derivative." Loretta's earrings jangled their protest. "It's a named artist." "Is it?" he said, writing nothing. Hector hovered where he could see the side hall. He's a still man when he chooses. A tree no one would notice until they try to cut the shade. The black box truck's crew hung in the foyer like punctuation. Victor kept drifting toward the back. He never learned to stay in the center of a conversation. He always needed a side door to feel like a strategist. "Kitchen," he said, breezy. "I want the cameos, Mother promised." "They're cataloged," I said, "by the executor." It wasn't the exact job term, but Marin did not correct me. Some words are armor, others are simply the right spell in the right room. Evan peeled away, phone in hand like a prosthetic. His hoodie shadowed his face. He had the look he gets before a teenage prank, high on the idea of getting away with being himself. He took 2 unconcerned steps down the side hall toward the mudroom, where the side door he'd texted me about last night lived. Hector's voice didn't raise, just thickened. "Wrong way, son." "Bathroom," Evan said. Smirk lodged. "Bathroom is left," Hector said without moving. "That's right. I'm ambidextrous," Evan tried. Chief Williams shifted into his line of sight, friendly as a fence. "You can be ambidextrous in the front hall," she said. He shrugged, punched at his phone, leaned against the wall like he was bored enough to combust. The camera in the smoke detector blinked its red blink. He didn't look up. Gordon reached for the brooch again, angling it toward the light for a glamour shot. Chief Williams stepped closer. "Mr. Vale," she said, "my dispatcher says your license expired last year. You want to tell me why you didn't mention that?" Gordon's throat worked. "I've applied for renewal." "You've applied for patience," she said. "You can look but you don't touch. Jesus had better credentials." Loretta bristled. "This is harassment." "This is Tuesday," Chief Williams said. "We made a show of cataloging so they would make a show of wanting." Helena tried to pocket a monogrammed silver letter opener. Marin asked her to hold it up for a photo, then photographed Helena holding evidence. Pastor Elaine pretended to tie her shoe while moving the decoy ring box an inch to the left, just to see who noticed. Helena noticed. She noticed everything that glittered and nothing that glowed. In the small dull spaces between, my phone hummed in my pocket like a suppressed thought. I ignored it. Then it hummed again, harder, and the screen lit my palm when I finally looked. From Aaron. "FYI, Tessa's draft. She'll kill me for forwarding, but you should see tone. We can still shape this if you're reasonable." Attached, a Google Doc link and a PDF. I didn't click, not yet. I could feel its temperature through the screen. Evan dropped a whisper to Victor. Victor laughed a half-inch of laugh. Helena winced at the price of being thwarted. Gordon drifted like a man wished he'd stayed in his car. Outside, the box truck idled, exhaling diesel and bad decisions. Marin slipped to my side. "We've got what we need," she said. "Photos. If you're expired appraiser with sticky fingers. We don't want escalation, we want pattern." Victor, done pretending to be charmed, tried the oldest move in the book. He walked toward the study as if discipline were a physics law that applied to other people. Hector stepped into the doorway and became a door. "No further," he said, still polite, because some men think politeness is consent and it's instructive for them to learn otherwise. Victor stopped, not because he wanted to, but because a man who believes in force always hesitates when a quiet man says no and means it. He smiled, the condescension kind. "You're the gardener," he said. Hector's eyes crinkled. "I grow boundaries." Rosa barked a laugh she didn't know anyone. Loretta's nerve broke first. "This is ridiculous," she said, scooping air with her hands like she could collect what she wasn't getting. "We'll come back with a court order." "Bring a licensed appraiser," Chief Williams said. "And a better cologne." They retreated with dignity they rented by the hour, Victor pausing at the threshold to deliver one last truth costume. "You think this audience makes you strong," he said to me. "It makes you noisy. The market hates noise." "The market hates fraud," Noah said mildly from the stairs, holding a printout like a priest with a bulletin. The door closed. The house regained its breath. We stood still long enough to hear the grandfather clock and the soft electrical hum of cameras riding our day into memory. I finally opened Aaron's attachment. Headline: Teacher inherits fortune, chooses grace, why Maya Cole plans to share her windfall with family. The body was a symphony of poison in a polite key. Sources close to the family, concern for an overwhelmed granddaughter, a generous compromise led by her seasoned business father. Quotes attributed to a family friend, read like Helena's Christmas letters. A pull quote attributed to me that I'd never said. "I don't need much, I just want peace." In the footer, the document history showed invited editors. Tessa at Aaron at Latchleb M. Sloan at Helena Cole. Com. The share setting was anyone with link. I scrolled while rising. Halfway down there was a photo to illustrate our fable, me on the porch last night, head bowed, the rabbit key catching porch light like a star. The angle was low. The frame was too intimate to be a guess. Someone had been close on my property when I thought the dark was just dark. Marin looked over my shoulder. Her hand found the back of a chair and gripped. "Close the dock," she said. "Save the PDF, we make copies, then we set fires where we choose." Outside, a car door slammed. Another opened. The box truck didn't leave. The side gate clicked once, the sound a coin makes when it drops into a machine that hasn't decided whether to eat or spit it back. My phone buzzed again, one more message from Aaron, as if he could still be the man who arrived on time. They want to run it at 5 p.m. If you agree to the language, it dies. If not, it runs. I typed 3 words and didn't hit send. The porch light hummed. Somewhere a camera red blinked. The house waited to see which door I would lock and which one I would open. I called Aaron from the back steps because endings belong outside where air can move. The porch boards felt like memory, Grandpa replacing one slat at a time each spring until the deck was a ship that still believed in land. He picked up fast. "Thank God we're done," I said. Silence, then the clatter of him picking up his lines. "Maya, be reasonable. Tessa's draft was leverage. It never had to run. I can pull it. I will pull it. I'll fix the transfer profile mess. You asked a lawyer to draft a postnup assigning my voting rights. You looped in Helena's assistant. You had beers with my father about my life. You don't get to be the fireman after you lit the porch." "Come on," he said, incredulous in the way men get when their own reflection says no. "I was protecting us. Do you have any idea how fast this goes sideways without structure?" "This is structure," I said, calm enough to hear my own pulse. "It's called a boundary." He pivoted to tenderness like it was a sales feature. "I love you." "No," I said, "you love what loving me looks like." The air between us went brittle. "You want to throw away a future over optics?" he asked, and when I didn't answer, something mean moved in. "You think you're different from them. You're cash drunk already. Enjoy being noble alone." "I already was," I said and hung up. Inside, the house received me without comment. Marin stood at the table with a stack of envelopes like a croupier dealing consequences. "Executions," she said. "Cease and desists with attachments. Helena's clutch, Evan's salute, Victor's 207 tour. Temporary restraining orders for the lot if they so much as jiggle a knob." And here she slid a slim blue folder toward me, are the governance locks at Cole Polar. Rosa came in on the tail of a January gust, cheeks hot with cold. "We're buttoned up," she said. "Board alerted, bylaws invoked. Any transfer request needs unanimous consent of independent directors and a quorum of angels." "Angels?" I asked. "Employees who can't be bought because they've already been paid in dignity," she said. "We have more of those than Victor remembers." "Mrs." Daria set 4 bowls on the table like ammunition, chili, cornbread, sliced apples, pickles, food that doesn't ask questions. "Eat," she said. "Then bury them in paper." We ate and buried. Marin's letters rode the printer out hot. Noah faxed things to the Stone Age and emailed them to the future. Chief Williams thumbed out a message to a detective about expired licenses and trucks that idle too long near old women's houses. When the bowls were empty, I dialed Tessa. She answered on the first ring like she'd been staring at my name. "Tell me you're ready to be smart," she said. "I'm ready to be clear," I said. "You're fired." "Oh, come on," she said, equal parts hurt and professional insult. "You don't fire a friend, you ghost her for 6 weeks and then you remember her birthday." "You pitched a story about my grief to my mother," I said. "You edited it with my fiancé, you took their retainer to shape me." "That is not what happened," she said, which is what people say when it is. She inhaled, exhaled, switched keys. "Look, babe, I can place this at Family and Fortune by 5. Clean headline. No villains, you become America's favorite responsible heiress." "Don't," I said. "Not favorite, not heiress, not yours. A beat of pure offense. You'll regret this when the internet decides for you." "It already decided," I said. "I'm just catching up." She tried one last carrot. "Victor said," I ended the call. My hands shook again, and this time I let them. Mrs. Daria pressed a warm dish towel into my palms like a poultice. "You hold that," she said, as if heat could keep a person from breaking apart. Rosa checked her watch. "You ready to go be visible?" she asked. "Where?" I said. "Warehouse," she said, already moving. "It's Friday. First shift guys get nervous when bosses whisper." The loading dock's breath fogged the winter air. Men and women in beanies and branded coats looked up when we walked in, the hum of the conveyor belt filling what words couldn't. Rosa hopped onto a pallet like it was a stage and clapped her hands once. 2 minutes, she said. Then back to vaccine kits and broccoli. They gathered, curiosity wearing gloves. I stood beside her and felt 16 again, giving a book report in a cafeteria that smelled like tater tots and chlorine. Henry and Elizabeth built profit sharing into this place, Rosa said. They built pensions that don't disappear. That doesn't change because people in a big house argue about forks. Can I get an amen? Amen, the floor said, in a dozen accents that sounded like the town. I stepped forward. My throat wasn't steady, so I told the truth. I know you're hearing things, I said. About me, about family. Here's what matters. Your share stays your share. Your retirement is your retirement. The company is not an ATM and it's not a stage for people who need applause. It's trucks and schedules and keeping lettuce cold. I won't touch what feeds you, that's a promise. Hector, when had he appeared, leaned against a stack of folded pallets and let his mouth smile. A woman named Lupa, who taught me to drive a forklift at 12 when Grandma wasn't looking, raised her chin. We got your back if you got ours, she said. I do, I said, and felt something settle in my chest where panic had been living rent-free. We stood there breathing cold air like medicine. Then phones began to buzz along the line, a ripple of haptics moving from belt to dock. A man named Davis frowned at his screen. Lupa cursed quietly. Rosa's face went very still. Noah's name lit mine, I answered. You're about to get a call, he said. Smile when you don't want to. The second line flashed, unknown/private, and I knew the voice before it started because the moneyed world breeds a certain tenor in men who think the market is a mirror. MS. Cole, the caller said, cordial like a winter sun. This is Paul Greer at Harbor and Hale. I manage a couple of Mr. Victor Cole's personal lines. How are you this afternoon? Busy, I said. What can I do for you, Mr. Greer? I'm afraid we're looking at a bit of a transient imbalance, he said in the euphemism dialect. Market flutter, nothing dramatic, but our client has pledged collateral that has, shall we say, shifted, very normal, usually resolved with a quick infusion from a friendly wallet. Family love, that sort of thing. Rosa rolled her eyes so hard the forklift might have moved. I said. And it would be useful, Greer continued, smooth, bored, deadly, if you could execute a simple consent to allow us to recognize the anticipated estate interest that Mr. Cole has always understood to be available. Pure formality. By Monday, ideally. Just avoids a mess. We'd hate to liquidate any sentimental assets like the lake house. Noah's voice threaded in from my shoulder, a whisper, record him. I thumbed the button. Mr. Greer, I said. 2 things. 1. There is no such legal creature as an anticipated estate interest for a third party. 2. My grandparents executed a notarized affidavit specifically disclaiming any pledge of their estate for anyone's personal debt. I'm emailing it to you as we speak. A pause, a paper rustle, a smile that didn't reach the line. I'm sure we can find a compromise, he said. You don't want headlines, your father has reach. So do facts, I said. His pleasantness cooled half a degree. Very well. We'll proceed under the documents we have. If you change your... I won't, I said and hung up. For a heartbeat nobody spoke. Then the dock cheered, ragged and real, the sound of people who lift things for a living approving of something that wasn't a speech. Rosa wiped at an eye like the wind offended her. Hector tipped an invisible hat. My phone vibrated again, this time with a text from Victor, blistering through my pocket like a wasp. Answer Greer. Sign by Monday or I crash. And when I crash, I don't crash alone. The screen showed dots, then more Lake House, Aspen, the club all gone. That's on you. Fix it or explain to the town why you watched your father drown. I stared until the words stopped being words. In my mouth, a taste like copper. In my ear, Grandpa, don't let a drowning man tell you the water is your fault. I typed back 3 letters no. And didn't hit send. The forklift beeped. The belt hummed. Somewhere in town. A bank printer coughed out a notice of call. Back at Sycamore, Marin was waiting at the table with a fresh stack of paper and a look that meant the next move was ours. Greer, she asked. Greer, I confirmed. She nodded. Good, we wanted him to call. Now we send his compliance officer Henry's affidavit, the recording, and the letter quoting the statute that will make him sweat through his tie. Then we send Victor a choice with timestamps. What choice? I asked. Pay his own bill, she said. Or learn what drowning feels like when no one else jumps in. The grandfather clock chimed like a countdown. The porch light hummed. My phone lit with another unknown number, a Cayman code blinking like tropical water. I let it ring. The house waited with me, full of witnesses and soup and the steady weight of paper, while Monday walked toward us like weather.